Yeah.
Was Leon going to, no, Leon?
I just texted. Yeah.
Was Leon going to, so I guess they can see the whole room.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. You see that
Okay.
one? You walk around the top, that's what they see.
Can't see me over here.
There we go. Hey, that dial is old.
So she's.
Come right in here. This is stage. There you go.
Jamie?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Are we muted or are we live mic?
Live.
Why don't you mute us for a minute? Now they can hear you.
Can you hear, Dr. Bronner? Okay. Luke, can you hear?
Yes.
All right. We're waiting on Leon.
Who are you gonna tell if it's $5 late?
Hey, when he walks in, let's all clap.
Yes.
Oh, is he showing up?
Yeah, when he all walks in, we'll clap. It was
Yeah.
All your pictures. Oh, do I have to? Yeah, be polite. Okay.
Jamie,
Yes, ma'am.
Eunice back.
I can't.
Jamie, unmuted. Okay, you're good to go.
Good. All right, it's about 10 minutes till 2. Workshop, Liberty County Commissioners Court, and a bunch of others here with us too. Talk with Liberty County EMS. Just kind of go over some important notes and some findings, and see what Mike and company have with Liberty County EMS. Mike, whenever you're ready, let's go ahead.
I'm ready.
Get started. All right.
I'm ready. Should I look into that or look here?
You take your pick.
Take my pick?
Yeah.
Well, Leon, I had a book for you. I should have dropped it. I didn't know you wasn't coming here. I apologize.
I had my choice of looking this way or moving Leon. I did good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when we came to the county here a while back, I'm Mike Cohen, Liberty County EMS. I joke around with folks. I say I'm the idiot of the bunch because I got such good paramedics and medics working for me, but we got the executive director is my title. I have my board here. Don Nealon and Mike Templeton. He's on our board, but he's not here. Johnny Spurlock and Dana Pittman, and Dr. Bronner, Dr. Marlo Bronner up there, and myself. We consist of our board. We're short a position and we're looking at somebody to fill that. But what we did is we put together this book outlining the presentation that we're going to be giving y'all. We're going to kind of do a walkthrough of Liberty County EMS, and by the time we get through this whole book and all of the folks that we've got here that are going to talk, then y'all will have a very good idea or a very good knowledge of how Liberty County EMS works. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was started in 1977 by back in the 70s, the late 60s and mostly early 70s, the late 70s. The funeral homes got out of the ambulance business. The Department of State Health Services, the state of Texas, started requiring so much education and started requiring a lot of accountabilities and various things as that the funeral homes elected to get out of it. So when that happened, you had a lot of communities like Old Zeta, that didn't have an ambulance service, as well as, millions of other little EMS agencies out there. So what happened is they went and took a look at a van ambulance, these 5 volunteers, one of them being the Methodist preacher there in Zeta. And these 5 volunteers went and looked at an ambulance and brought a carpenter with them. And this carpenter said, well, I can build all that cabinetry in there. So they went and bought a van, high-top van that they had. I don't even know, nothing like what we have today. And he built all the cabinetry in there. And then the funeral home gave them the gurney, as they called it back then. We call them stretchers now. They gave them the gurney, and with the latches to latch it down. And then they started having fundraisers, and the next thing you know, they all went and most of them went and took an ECA class, and that's emergency care attendant class. And all that happened back then. While that was going on over here, I lived in Brookshire, Patterson, in Patterson, Texas, actually. Brookshire's on the west side of Katy, and we were doing the same exact thing. And so my first EMT class was an ECA class, and we manned the ambulance over there like they were doing over here, all volunteers. At some point in time there, as the years kind of progressed, maybe about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years later, if that, Mr. Don Nealon here got his ECA and became the president of the organization for a while. But, so that's kind of the way that that Holy Zeta Volunteer Ambulance Service started. The years progressed. I got involved 23 and a half years ago. In 1997 is when I got involved. Ain't that right? And, but anyway, they were having a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And so Mike Templeton and a couple other medics came and talked to me, and they talked to Don, and they talked to Dana about getting on a board. They were needing to start a board. Ultimately, that's what we did, or they did. They got advice from Mark Moorfield on how to do it. So with all of that good information and advice, we had our first board meeting. And about a year later, well, what ended up happening for about 6 months there, I worked mostly volunteer. I had my own business, a fire training business. So after about 6 months, we saw that the need was going to be for a full-time person in that position that I was doing. So I worked, I started working on a full-time basis. And then about 2 years, a year and a half after the new board started and the new management started, one of the problems that we had lawsuits on us from the I don't have it right moment, but from the Texas Board of I'm sorry, I feel like Joe Biden saying from the from Texas Department of Health, and then we had a lawsuit that we had 3 lawsuits we had to settle. The Texas Department of Health, they had a case against us because of a particular call, and just a lot of things that needed to be cleaned up. The Texas Department of Health told us that one of the things that we had to do is we had to change the name. So we changed the name to Liberty County EMS because at that point in time, there were thoughts about us becoming a county entity. And we had talked to a couple of commissioners about becoming a county entity. But there were too many things that needed to be cleaned up for us to do it at that point in time. There was a lot of issues that we were having to deal with, and things that needed to be resolved. But we did go ahead and name it Liberty County EMS. And so we stayed Liberty County EMS, and we started growing. And we had a real big growing spurt. And as we grew, we started taking on more and more territory. And ultimately, as the years went by, we ultimately covered everything in Liberty County except for the city of Liberty. They had a North Liberty County EMS. We ultimately took that over. And then they had a Westlake EMS, and we ultimately took that over. And in through those years, we joined up with Texas A&M and University of Texas Science Health Center, Dr. Red Duke. He had started a program and had gotten grants from the U.S. Army. And what they had gotten was $25 million worth of grants to develop an audio-visual communications with an ambulance, a 911 ambulance, while it was rolling up and down the road. They had telemedicine, when they were just starting with telemedicine. They had some telemedicine going, but what the telemedicine that they had going, you couldn't link up to it and change from place to place. So they ultimately accomplished that goal. It was a great opportunity for us. We were involved in it was a very big project, and it was breaking a lot of new grounds for our business, for the EMS business. And we were fortunate when Katrina hit New Orleans, we took that ambulance to New Orleans, and we linked up. We joined up with the 82nd Airborne, and we were kicking doors down in facilities where the elderly lived, and we would get those patients out of there. A lot of them were really in bad shape, and we'd load them up and bring them to the ambulance, and we'd link up to Dr. Duke and Dr. King at the ER in Houston. And we were the only entity in the world at that time that was able to do that. And they made a pretty big deal of it. We got a lot of advertising out of that. But it was pretty cool that us being able to do that. And we utilized that technology for a while, and A&M ultimately sold it. The entity they sold it to went bankrupt, and one thing led to another. So we no longer have that technology in our ambulances, but that's one of the things that we're wanting to put back into our ambulances. So as the years have gone on now, we've moved on in the years, and once the Affordable Health Care Act was initiated, then not only the hospitals and not only the doctors, but it ultimately became down to us. We were all affected. And they started cutting the payments that they made to all of these entities. They started doing whatever cuts they could do because it was costing them a lot of money. It cost insurances a lot of money to cover patients that had already had, outlying problems. And so for them to cover that, for them to be able to cover that and afford it, they had to start cutting expenses everywhere. And it affected us. And so as time went on, we ended up asking a couple of the cities for, more money. And the cities went out for bids, and they went with other animal services. So now we cover the county primarily. So we've had call volume drops, and with the COVID virus, people are not wanting to go to the hospital. We're doing a lot of treat at the house, of which we don't get paid for. Nobody will pay us for that. Insurances won't pay us, Medicare won't pay us, and Medicaid won't pay us. Even though we take a 12-lead heart monitor in there and do a EKG, and check them out really good and check a lot of what's going on with them, these paramedics. Nowadays, the training and the experienced paramedics we got, they can pretty much tell whether a patient really and truly needs to go to the hospital or not. So, but that's a lot of stuff that we do that we don't get paid for. So that's kind of where things have gotten. And now we're in a position to where we're coming here doing a presentation so that we'll go through everything, and the final part of our presentation will be financials and kind of where things are at with us. Again, we're a 501c3 company. At any time, any of y'all can walk into my office and knock on the door and come in and say, Mike, I'd like to see y'all's financials. I want to see what's going on here. And it's happened several times. I've got a book that I keep financials in. I'll pull that off. I'll set them down at my conference table in my office and say, okay, what do you need to know? And I'll go through the whole thing with them. And we have to do that by law. Nonprofits, we're required to be open to the public. So now what we're going to do, we're going to start off here with Johnny. Johnny's going to come up. He's going to introduce our supervisors. We're gonna have several people talking today, going through this whole process. And, I think y'all, like I said, by the time we get through here, y'all should, be very knowledgeable of Liberty County EMS. Okay? All right, John.
I'm John Harkin with Liberty County EMS for 21 years. I'm assistant director. Thank you all for being here today, by the way. The first thing I want to do is introduce all of our supervisors that we have here. Kelvin Burks, he's over our police department. Jared Oliver, he's over clinical. Jack Terry's over. Those two are married, by the way, if you didn't know that. But Brandy and Jack, they're both over supply. And Jack mainly deals a lot with the narcotics and DEA. These guys here, they, after we made a change of putting them on the chase truck, which we just implemented a couple of months ago, they were working a 24, 48-hour shift. Now they're working a 24-hour shift and they're off 3 days. So these guys right here, they work their butt off. And they're out on the vehicle now helping our crews that are out on calls. They'll go help assist them. If it's if we're gonna get a disregard or refusal off the call, they can take care of that. These guys right here, they work really hard for us. And our crews are currently on what's called the Houston 9-day rotation. Houston Smart shift or something like that. They work 24 on, off 24, work 24, off 24, and they work another one, and then they're off for 4 or 5 days. So people in EMS work a lot. You didn't know that. A lot of overtime. And, I did it for many years, many, like 19, 20 years. And it's hard. It's totally on me. But anyhow, that's about my spiel, and I'm going to let Helen take it away.
I cost us lots and lots of money. The stats on the trucks, if you go to tab 1 right behind it, it's got unit stats, there's 2 pages. It really covers what we have currently, what's running currently, pretty much the status, the current mileage, and pretty much where we're at. We've got the oldest model we still have in our fleet that we run every day is a 2014. There's 2 of those. We usually buy them like that. Sometimes they're sister trucks. Sometimes there's a little difference in the bin, but we buy them 2 at a time like that. And for the longest time, every single year we were doing 1 to 2 remounts. Most of the time it was 2 remounts. And by remount, I'm saying take the box off, take the chassis out, put a new chassis under it, and they go through it, put a new generator, new air conditioner, new formica in the back, new floor, new panels. I mean, it looks like a brand new truck, new paint, new stripes. And you can see how we tracked 14, we did it twice, 15, 16. And the last year that we've actually done a remount or bought a new truck was 2017. We saw how this was going 3 years ago, that the money was getting, our call volume was still pretty good, but our collections were really bad. And no fault of our own, that's just what we ended up at. And so we've made these trucks last as long as we possibly can. And you can see, 200,000+ miles. They're all Dodge chassis. They all have issues. To get a remount now is about 70 to 80,000. To buy a new truck is bumping about 220, Mike. About 220 for a new truck, complete brand spanking new, and that's empty. That's nothing that these 2 guys back here put on. That's just bone stock empty. Then you put your monitor, you put all your supplies and everything else. So we've pushed them to the point there's just not a whole lot of pushing left. They're constantly in and out of the shop. We're constantly having to spend money on them, and we do have 3 vans ordered to hopefully pick up some of the weight, and so we can start getting rid of these. But every one of these 9 trucks that are out here, we have a van. I didn't list it because we just can't keep it healthy enough to list it as a current truck. Every time we fix it, it breaks for something different. So, but every one of these boxes are remountable. They're all updated. They all pass the Texas Department of Transportation inspection. They all have new ACs. They all have new generators. Well, they need new generators, but they will remount versus buying a brand new truck. And that's that's one of the beauties of buying the Frazier. Yes, they're a little more expensive, but you can keep the box for years and years and years as long as they will recertify. These all will recertify. And when Johnny touched briefly on, we work a 24 on, 3-day off shift, but that doesn't really take into consideration that if one of these trucks break, my phone rings. If supply happens, or we have a diversion with a narcotic, their phone rings. If a clinical issue happens, his phone rings. So technically we're away, but we're not away. In other words, we're always on call pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But, we've pushed the truck. There's just not a whole lot more pushing we can do with them. And they're very expensive. They're very, very, very expensive. And that's just the chassis and the truck. That's not what all goes on. So, with that being said, mine's pretty brief, pretty quick. Is there any questions about the trucks or the statuses of them or anything? No?
I heard something about you ordered 3 vans.
We did.
Have we done any research on how these vans are gonna react or work?
Well, here's the reasoning for that. With a van, they're cheaper, number one. They're more cost effective to drive them down the road, better on fuel. The maintenance on them, $200 to $220 to $230 for a diesel service versus $40 to $50 for a van service. I mean, we're trying to do everything we can to recoup all of the money we've got going out. So with that being said, we're probably saving 50, 60, 70,000 a year just by the 3 vans versus what we're doing now, or with the Frazier. I mean, you're talking $220 to go in and have it serviced versus a $40 to $50 oil change.
Kelvin, I've been in the back of these boxes numerous times. We're tight as it is.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Now we're going to vans and.
Yes. And that was definitely a topic of conversation. And I fought him because I didn't want to go to the vans. But at the stretch we're at right now, we have to do something to cut costs. That was the most cost-effective way to put us in another truck that's brand new that we can get some longevity out of. I mean,
But you haven't really done any research on how these vans are going to hold up in Liberty County doing what kind.
well, they're going to hold up like anything else. These are beat up too. I mean, they're all going to get beat
Yeah,
up.
but you got 3-4-year-old trucks. It's
Right.
200,000 on there.
Right. Well, the biggest problem with any fleet vehicle, okay, if it was just me and you driving it, it would be great. But when you've got 25 or 26 other people getting in them with different driving habits, they're not going to hold up for anybody. And Don can attest to that with patrol cars. Nothing you put in Liberty County is going to hold up on the roads.
But you just said a little while ago, you can reach announcements.
You can. You can.
And we're with you, Bill, in regards to that. We would much rather be able to remount them. We have found an entity. The vans, these 3 vans are gonna cost us $238,000, okay, for the 3 vans. We can get 3 ambulances remounted, and we're gonna, if we do it this way, we're gonna do it on gasoline engines instead of diesel engines. If they say, these guys tell me that do the remounting on these boxes. They're based in Conroe. And the cost for that is $285,000. Now that's with a gasoline engine. And he says that these guys that are running these are getting about 200,000 to 300,000 miles on gasoline engines, as long as they take care of it. The really good thing about it is to replace the engine in a diesel, you're talking close to $20,000. To replace a gasoline engine, $6,500 to $6,800. Okay, so but the issue is the vans. We can have those here in a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, and the remounts we're going to have to wait till probably February, the end of February, before they even start working on them.
What other research have you guys done? Have you talked about leasing vehicles?
We put too many miles on them to lease them.
Yeah.
Did you get programs in place?
Well, I haven't looked at a program for leasing in quite a while. When we did look into it, it would cost us a lot of money because of the mileage that we put on the vehicles.
When Mike took it over, they had leased ambulances with 6.0 Power Strokes, and it almost bankrupted the company way back then because you still got these big balloon notes and you got a truck that won't run. And, it was a disaster. It was a disaster then. I don't really know about now.
We're not going to settle this in this room tonight.
No,
Today, but
no.
Right.
Now, as far as, like you were talking about, when you grant, Jack, don't stand up.
Yeah.
How tall are you, Jack?
Do what?
How tall are you?
16.
I'm not sure you
You
can
can
answer.
get in that ambulance?
Do what?
You can get in that van, right?
I've driven them yet. I've been
I can stand up in the back. It's the same van that Amazon Prime is. That's why we haven't gotten them already, because they bought 150,000 of them at one whack. So the assembly line is kind of behind a little bit, but it's the same van as basically what Amazon Prime's running, you know, plus all of our goodies in the back. But I mean, was it our first go-to option? No. But that's what we ended up having to do.
Okay.
Anything else? That covered it?
No, but I'd like to say one more thing. I forgot to introduce Lavon. Remember I was talking about.
I apologize for that. I should have introduced. Without Lavonna, I'd be more brain racked than what I am now. Lavonna's our office manager and she does an excellent job. Has a memory like an elephant, I can tell you. It's unbelievable what she can remember. Come on, Brandy. This is Brandy Terry. She's one of our supervisors.
Yes,
And she has a specific job that she does for us.
thank you for your introduction. So yes, I deal with supply, dealing with the vendors. I have 4 different vendors that I deal with. Basically, we do a lot of yang back and forth on prices, trying to get them down, which here lately they've been pretty good. I can call them up and say, hey, I'm fixing to stock a new truck. I've got a whole bunch of different stuff that I'm about to buy, you know, can you cut me a deal? And they will. They're pretty good with that. Other than that, drug prices, all that kind of stuff has gone up recently. There's not really much you can do about that. Everything kind of rises. The supplies is a big, I guess, expense, you'd say. We do have the vans that we are gonna have to stock. They are going to be a lot less stock, so you can't fit everything that we've got the boxes in on. So that will be a little less, I guess you'd say, that is coming out of supply. But we also have us on the trucks as well that'll be able to restock them if needed. Basically, I have a little list set out. I receive supplies from vendors. I put them up. I have a huge supply room that I constantly go through, keeping up with dates, making sure they're, you know, all my drugs and stuff like that. Managing all my vendors, keeping good relationships. Most of them, like I said, will come off prices. If I have drug bags that I need to buy, they will come off of those. Then I have a big book that I keep up with everything that I've bought. The inventory that I keep on the trucks, all the trucks that we have stationed everywhere, basically we have to keep up with all the inventory on that. Basically, y'all have any questions for supply?
Brandy, what's the most items that you guys use? I mean, I know you use.
The norm, like on every call,
Yeah.
would be like IV, cardiac monitor, blood pressure cuffs, stuff like that.
Which comes with those significant costs.
IV supplies, not so much. Blood pressure cuffs are a little expensive. I get $175 box and it has roughly 80 in it. So I mean, yeah, it's not bad, but it's just plastic, and they're throwaway, so you can one use them.
Randy, can you
The
give an
biggest-
example of like what a drug cost from 2017 to today?
Did you put the sheet in here?
An example. Yeah.
Off the top of my head, like a Denison, if I remember right, like a Denison used to cost us like $6 a bottle. It now costs us $27 a bottle.
And that drug is used for?
Yeah, that's a cardiac drug. So you are basically, when say somebody's in SVT, I know that's kind of going out there, but it's a racing heart. You're stopping their heart, restarting it, correcting the rhythm. So that's a pretty big drug that you want to keep. Epi's gone up very, very much. Vial of Epi now is about $20 a bottle. It used to be like $1.89. So, I mean, that's a huge price change as well. And the majority of them are all like that. I mean, pretty much any drug we have has gone up tremendously. I mean, and the supplies as well. It's not just the drugs as well. You have, you know, glucoses are more expensive, and that's does chest compressions for you. I like that. The cardiac monitors are expensive. You know, everything has gone up. Anything you can think of, basically, that we have on the truck, it versus 2017 to 2020, everything has price increased. So we do see that. We are able, like I said, to communicate with them, and they will knock prices off. They'll help us out, but it's just going to constantly go up. It's the world, unfortunately.
So what do you guys do differently than Allegiance? And I hate throwing out any other ambulance companies. What do you guys carry on these boxes that these other companies don't?
Personally, I haven't been on their trucks, so I say that have more on their trucks. I don't know. I have not been in one of their boxes. I don't know. I've been with this company for 13 years. So I haven't been on another truck since.
But you were talking about Epi, you're talking about you know, these type of drugs restart hearts. These type of drugs get us to where you can get them to a trauma center. Is that correct?
Correct. And because we are so far out, yes, we do carry a little bit more, because when we do have a more critical patient, we're not going to bring them to one of our little local hospitals, because they're going to basically transfer them out as quick as possible. So we're trying to get them to the most appropriate spot. So therefore, we're carrying a little bit more in order to be able to treat them and get them there. Continue treatment and not run out of drugs.
This is Dr. Bronner. If I could just say a couple of things. Our transfer times are very long because the county is so big. And even when we call for a helicopter, we've got to maintain these patients for a good 20 to 30 minutes versus being like in the city of Cleveland and being able to drop them off at an ER setting. So she says, you know, a vial of Epi is $30. We might go through 4 or 5 vials, you know, trying to work a code while we're waiting, you know, for Herman to show up so we can get them to the appropriate facilities. So a big problem with us is that, you know, our county is so far and wide that we are taking a long time to get the patients to where they need to go just because of distance. And we're keeping them alive with these medicines, with all of our equipment while we're waiting to get them there. And that's been a big problem for us versus, you know, an EMS service that has a 7 or 8 transport time that can get them to a facility and they're done.
Right.
And the state kind of gives us a guideline of what's supposed to be on every single truck. There's a minimum list, and you have minimum of this, and this. Well, we do go above some of it, or a lot of it, I should say, because of the long transport times. But if you don't use those medications, they expire, and then you have to throw them in the garbage. But there is no exchange. You just bought them. And they mandate we carry certain things. The prices of the drugs keep going up, and pretty much everything in the back of that truck expires every year to 2 years. Pretty much everything, even including the narcotics, they go bad too. And you can't use it, you have to throw them in the garbage. So as we call them, consumables, like brakes and tires and stuff like that on a vehicle, it's the same concept. It's just there's a lot more of it. And that's what the state governs that we have on the truck.
Were you gonna say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say that with us being rural like we are, we carry a lot more because we do a lot of advanced life support calls.
If we were strictly in the city with a 5 or 10 minute transport time, we could absolutely run the base minimums. It would save us a lot of money, but we're not. We're sometimes 45 minutes to an hour away from definitive care, and you do go through medications trying to keep someone alive, and then, so you have to have it.
And
But
there's a
if
lot
you
of
don't
times-
use it, it expires.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and there's a lot of times we have to restock them because they ran out, and
And then when we
that's
do
us
use
running
it,
around restocking.
the insurance companies don't want to pay us for using it.
Okay.
Hi.
Hey.
You got something to say?
No, I was gonna say let Jack come up.
Okay.
That's what we're doing, talking about narcotics and stuff, Jack, come on up there, talk.
Let me see what we can call it.
My name's Jack Terry. I'm a paramedic supervisor with Liberty County EMS. Other than the day-to-day operations as a supervisor, my main job with Liberty County is narcotic control. I know that sounds kind of maybe ridiculous that you have one person that deals with simply narcotics, but I promise you it's a full-time job. I deal a lot with the DEA. I'm sure we all know somebody in law enforcement, or we've been in law enforcement ourselves, and the DEA writes rules and regulations. They're about as clear as mud, and they're open to a million different interpretations. So I'm constantly dealing with our DEA agent out of Beaumont to try to keep us compliant with the narcotic usage and the storage and the security features of the narcotics and all that stuff. Sure, the question on a lot of people's mind is, well, why do we need narcotics? I guess theoretically you don't until you're the one with a broken hip. When I say controlled substances or narcotics, I'm talking primarily pain medicines. I'm talking about medications to sedate you in case we have to do advanced airway skills or some type of advanced skills like that. So it's not when I say narcotics or controlled substances, it's not what most people think of as far as on the streets, stuff that law enforcement guys bring in. I have nothing to do with that. There's a whole list of reports and stuff that have to be kept in multiple places and filed with the DEA on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly time frame. I have to track each employee's usage of the controlled substances, just to make sure that we don't have any issues that throw a red flag as far as one employee using a whole lot of certain controlled medication. That kind of throws a red flag if he's using a lot more than the average employee. I'm also responsible for, if that comes up, then we start digging and find out why that's happening to keep us out of trouble with the DEA. That's really it. I mean, we operate the list of ambulances that Kelvin provided in the front. Every one of those units has to have, if it's going to be used, it has to be assigned its own set of narcotics. You cannot transfer, let me rephrase that. It takes an act of Congress to transfer our narcotics from one unit to the other because of the tracking process. So my thing works hand in hand with Brandy's as far as the cost of them. Narcotics are expensive. There is no contract pricing that I've ever found with them. None of the vendors that we use will give us a contract pricing because it's kind of unheard of. A lot of our costs depends on what the U.S. military is doing at the time. The reason is when the military starts engaging in acts of war, they start buying up controlled substances. So we start competing with other services locally to us, like Houston Fire Department or Montgomery County Hospital District. that have a substantial budget that can pay the extra price for it. And it's kind of like at the gas pumps. Once you pay $3.99 for a gallon of gas, just because it's over with doesn't mean you're gonna pay any less. Once they find out you'll pay it, that's what they keep it at. So there's a huge, there's a very large, not huge, but there's a very large amount of the controlled substances that we have that do expire. They are a waste. One of the biggest differences between the controlled substances is the regular medications is we buy the controlled substances from a vendor. We house and store the controlled substances. And then when they're expired, we have to pay a vendor to dispose of those controlled substances. So we pay at both ends with that. We can't just take them out. We can't destroy them. They have to be incinerated. There has to be a third party group that provides documentation back to me so I can send it to the DEA that shows that it was incinerated, was destroyed. And on the controlled substances that I'm talking about is class, anything up to class 4, class 1 through 4, controlled substances. And that's really what I do. I think Mr. Oliver is up next.
So we have to keep those narcotics in, we have a $30,000 cage that's tighter than a regular jail cage.
Just to give an example of the room that he's talking about, I'm sorry, I should have touched on it. Basically, there is a room inside of our main station. It contains out of this brick on 4 sides. It has a type of biometrics or key fob entry system. It is an active alarm system that notifies Dayzetta Police Department, Liberty County Sheriff's Department, myself, Kelvin, and 3 or 4 other people of any type of activation. We have to pay to have it tested every 6 months. The cage that's in it, to store our narcotics, we have to have a cage and a safe that's rated at what the DEA considers a 60-minute. I don't know how they word it, but basically it would take the average person with the average tools 60 minutes to gain access to the narcotics. So, and they don't consider cutting torches and that type of stuff as average tools. It's hammers and chisels and stuff like that. So he can give you the price of everything that went into that. I was part of it, but I wasn't part of the pricing.
We had a welder come in and weld it. Come on up here. This is Jared Oliver.
Is that Jared, I'm the clinical supervisor for Liberty County?
We didn't say a while ago, but I'm sorry, Kelvin is the also the police chief there in Dayzetta, and Jared is one of the deputies. That's correct.
So my job as clinical supervisor is to oversee all clinical operations and patient care aspects with the EMS service countywide. So unlike most EMS services, we do 100% of what we call QA/QI, quality assurance, quality improvement. So every time an ambulance run is generated, whether it's a 911 call, transfer, return back home, dialysis trip, we generate a record, electronic patient care record. The supervisor every day does 100% QA/QI. We ensure all the billing stuff is there for the billing company, the protocols and guidelines were followed, they're transported to the appropriate facility by the appropriate means, so on and so forth. So with me, as these supervisors find a clinical issue, they'll address it with the crew, and they'll forward it to my office, and we do continuing education, retraining, consult Dr. Bronner. We need to de-credential somebody or do some further education classes, etc. Oversee and maintain credentialing of all the field staff. So you go to EMT school, paramedic school, you get your patch, your certification, you come apply for a job with us. The medical director has to credential you. She says, yes, you have the blessing order, I need my medical license under our protocols. So we have to make sure we scan all those in, make sure they're validated, they renew them, we do all their CE hours, training hours, etc. Which moving into CE hours, every 4 years they have to recertify. So we have a program that does that. All the classes online, we hold classes in person in our Rainwood Training Center. which also involves CPR, advanced cardiovascular life support, and pediatric advanced life support. Their card classes expire every 2 years, and we're required to have those by our protocols. So I teach those classes as well to all of our employees and outside people that come in. Constant perform research. So I cost the company money through Brandy. Her and I work real close together. We look at the national standard, what everybody else is doing, ground services, air services, et cetera. And then I go to her and say, hey, here's what we want to change the protocols. Dr. Bronner's approved it. Can you get prices? And she shops for the right price for us. So hitting on what Bill said, what we do, unlike some other services, we carry ICU level drugs. On the back of our ambulances, it says mobile intensive care unit. We carry, for instance, 2 drugs, Cardine and Levofed. Those drugs are both mainly used in the ICU setting. So we roll into Herman or Baytown with those drugs going. The doctors and nurses are like, oh, wow, I'll carry those. She's working on getting us IV pumps. We have, like she said, the automatic CPR devices. We have ventilators that breathe for us. So if we're out in a rural setting or going to Herman or Kingwood or the Woodlands, we can pretty much have somebody do CPR, breathe for them, and give medications while we sit there and do our report and monitor the vital signs. So we have all those advanced level therapies and equipment that we've got throughout the years that stand us apart from everybody else. We also have contracted with Lee College. We provide all the in-person instruction for their EMT basic program here at the South Liberty County campus. I'm the lead instructor, assisted by all the supervisors teaching. It's a 6 to 8 month course. They also host the clinicals at our location. They have to come do ambulance clinicals and hospital clinicals. We've had 2 classes through them now. We also respond to all the major incidents inside the county. There's a major crash, natural disaster, train wreck, something like that, we respond. And then we have a chain of command level for medical control. So a crew, if they have to operate outside the guidelines and need help, they'll contact non-duty supervisor. If they're unavailable on another call or they're busy, then it goes up through me, Johnny, and Dr. Bronner. And then I touched in the book, you'll see under our daily supervisor responsibilities, that's everything that we do every day. All the supervisors come in, we do all of our PCR checks, our reports, make sure everything's there, send them back to be corrected if they need to. We fill in type of narcotics, supplies from the last shift, deliver them out to all the stations. Respond to all the calls, respond to the stations and make sure that they're clean and kept up so all the stations are squared away and presentable for the public. And then also be available by phone for all shift-related questions. Call off sick, family emergencies, apparatus going down for maintenance or whatever the issue may be, and we're coordinating in between. So there's a fleet incident on the shift, contact Kelvin, narcotic issue, contact Jack, so on and so forth. And then we report directly to the assistant director and the executive director. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. We are part of the Liberty County Sheriff's Office Special Response Team or SWAT team. We do their medical training and medical response for their activations. Kelvin and I head that up. So if they get a SWAT call out day or night, one of us, so we have one part-timer that goes as well, provide all the medical for the team.
Chair, do y'all use ICD codes? ICD?
Under billing, yes, sir.
I think in 2017, they had like 20,000 ICD codes, and then I think 2019, they bumped it up to over 70,000 ICD codes. Did y'all fall into that?
That's something.
Okay.
That's after we do it.
Okay.
He's gonna come up here in a minute. I haven't introduced him. It's Kevin Carpenter. He's with our billing company. Right now, Johnny is going to come up. We keep statistics. We have a lot of statistics and Johnny's gonna, y'all will see if you turn the page there.
Go to section 5, please. If you look, we broke county down into zones. And on this, the far right-hand top, you have Ames, you got Southwest Lake State. I'm not gonna go over every one of these, but you have the zone, you have the number of calls in that zone, the calls per day, and the total that were Medicare, Medicaid, and self-pay. So if you look at, just take Plum Grove, for example, you had 244 from January 20th, January 2020 to July 31st, 2020. You had 244 calls. That's 1.15 calls per day. And out of those, you had 12% for Medicare, 13% Medicaid, 59% were self-paid. I mean, That's terrible. It's terrible. We don't get money out of that.
You say self-pay on there.
No insurance?
I mean, I understand that, but is it the total bill or is it partial bill that they self-pay? Total bill. Thanks.
Have no insurance whatsoever. And how does, I can go by the one by one, or y'all can just look it over. It's up to y'all.
How do these percentages compare to, say, 2015 or
Actually going up,
going up? In what way? Which,
and talk more self-pay.
oh, okay.
Self-pays are increasing drastically.
Okay. How is that compared to 10 years ago?
20 years ago, I would say more people are insured.
Yeah, Kevin will be able to answer. He has some active.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean
statistics
to.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna have some as soon as anything billing, he's gonna be able to
You
answer.
guys try to negotiate, cost with these self-pays? I mean,
Yes.
try to, hey, can you at least send $100?
They do. We have some people send $25.
Okay, what is the average cost of an ambulance ride?
Average
Thousands.
Costs would be, charge is different than cost. How much
The
is it cost?
charge,
How much is the charge?
yeah.
Okay,
I
charge
mean, I can
is,
probably tell you because I pay them, but for a self-pay, $100 and it's probably 5,000, 6,000, 3,000.
the average transport out of this county is probably somewhere in the $1,600 to $1,800 range. Because again, because of the rural area, the mileage
Yes.
really adds up when you compare it to like Houston. A lot of insurance companies like to do that comparison, but, we have to really put that in perspective that, the nearest hospital is significantly further than, in the city. So, but yeah, probably about $1,600, $1,800.
So there's a difference between if you're running a code versus if you're running grandma's stuff, big
Exactly.
code. Is that the case, or is it all the same cost?
But it should be
It's based off level of service, so it depends on what type, whether it's advanced life support, basic life support, refusals, treatment and transports, depending on what they do to them, the cost varies.
Okay,
A
well,
code like you're talking about can be up to $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
if I stub my toe and I need somebody to come pick us up and you charge me $5,000, yeah, I'm gonna squawk a little bit.
Right, and that wouldn't be the case because it wouldn't be considered, stubbing the toe wouldn't be considered an emergent call. It's gotta be reasonableness as well as far as playing into what the service is provided. So the cost is again based off level of service. If it's a basic life support, non-emergency, that cost is probably more along the $800 range versus an emergency transport, advanced life support that goes to the hospital. So that all goes by
Think
into it.
about a base car and call it all the options. The more you get, the more you pay. The more you bill
The ones that you buy.
No, I don't buy
Kevin's gonna be getting up here in just a second.
Look at them.
I'm just going over the zone. Any other questions?
Yeah, so talking about your poll runs, so compared to, kind of same question. This is 2020, and I've seen in the later in the handouts, comparisons in number of runs, especially billable runs. But compared to, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what are your total runs, not billable, total runs going up? They are. But I mean, just for 2020 or even before that?
It's been a steady decline.
Total runs, really? Even with population growth?
What's really hurt this year is COVID too. Nobody wants to go to the hospital.
Oh, yeah,
Nobody wants to
yeah.
go in.
And that's what speaks volumes to me here, is that
And-
2020
and
is
another-
anomalous.
Another thing
And
that,
it's gonna get any better.
Right.
another thing that affected this was, insurance companies, whenever, people now will go to an urgent care instead of an ER because of your copay
Right.
on your insurance. So when Obamacare came out a few years ago and all that, and then your insurance, copays changed, where it would cost you $200 to go to the ER for a copay, well, people would call an ambulance and go. I mean, that's what it was. And now they're saying, if you go by ambulance, it's per your deductible. If you go to the ER, it's this much copay, but if you go to the urgent care, it's $75. So people are choosing to go to urgent cares over emergency rooms because their insurance, they're less out of pocket. They have less, with that expense. So therefore, we don't have as many people calling 911. That's part of why I think the private pays, the self-pays have increased because it's uninsured people and, so they don't have any insurance and they will call an ambulance and get into the emergency room to be
Because that's
seen.
probably a true emergency.
Correct. And, so that's a lot also of why we're seeing the change in the call volume, is due to that insurance thing.
You guys don't transport for urgent care.
No, we can't do urgent care. We can take them out, but we can't bring them there.
So the Affordable Care Act has hurt the ambulance service significantly.
Yes.
Yeah, it didn't work out the way they planned.
Yeah, we collect less.
Well, Medicaid rates are low too.
Yes.
And what does insurance companies follow? They're gonna start following Medicare and Medicaid.
When did they do the last adjustment on Medicare? Last downward?
Every year they do it.
Every year.
Yearly.
Dialysis transports for non-emergency patients has been cut 20% over like the past 3 or 4 years, so the reimbursements is significantly lower.
The meanwhile, supplies keep going up.
Yep.
Costs.
We've got a lot of
Okay, the next page is Marilyn, number 6, your book is mine.
Get on camera.
My back. Number 6 is, this is our accounts receivable, aging report, from 2018 to 2020. On the right side, you can see, this is billable calls. This is what, the receivables that we billed in billable calls. The calls is on the right, and this is the amount, that we actually billed, that is owed to us, is what this page is.
And what's your total average uninsured?
On,
Across county, 41%, so, so 41% of that is
yeah, it's gonna be
self-pay.
self-pay.
I expect that's gonna go higher than.
Yeah, we actually tried to go back and collect some old stuff, and that's where you'll see this in the middle, a little higher there, but it didn't work. And so basically, we had to write a bunch of our receivables off. That's why you'll see the number drop. We couldn't, it was not collectible, so it was written off.
Do you at least get a tax write-off for that?
what?
Well,
We're non.
There you go. Yeah. Right. So, and then on the right side, you'll see the total calls. That's billable calls. For 2018, our billable calls for the year were 6,727. In 2019, we dropped to 5,888, which we were down 839 calls. And then right now we were at, well, as of August, the end of August, we were at 2682. If we average and run around the 330 mark for the rest of the year, that's gonna put us at around 4,002 calls for the year. That's down 1,886 calls from last year.
yeah, which is like almost a third from the year.
What did you say it was?
Yeah.
33%.
43%.
Well, from 2017 to
Okay.
Yeah, that's
43%
33.
increase.
What'd you say the dollar was on that? The average collection?
Your average, you mean for the volume or the average of the call?
For the, well,
We're averaging about $320,000 a month, cash receipts back in 2017. And today you're averaging about $140,000. And there's a lot of moving parts there, so I'll get into the details of that.
Yeah. And then the next page on next section, number 7, This is our receivables from 2019 January to November. We opted to use another billing company, not the one that we have here now that we're using. We started using them again. We used to use them and then moved to this other was supposed to be a more aggressive billing and collection company. Did not work out to be that way. So we actually went back to QuickMed, but
And more aggressive salesman, huh?
it was like, what do? We have to try something to get more money here, and it's not there to be gotten. I wish you're gonna get it. But, so it shows here, it ends at September because that's when they picked up, but from January to August, it shows you what our receivables were. And then the next, it shows you what we actually received payment for that amount of receivables. And then the adjustments and what was left on the AR balance there, for those two. Now.
And adjustments are what?
Adjustments are, anything written off, Medicare allowables, whatever Medicare or Medicaid will allow or disallow, your co-insurance, for, private pay, anybody that has insurance that, we will discount their bill once it's gone into, their insurance pays whatever is gone on to the patient responsibility, then we will discount that bill again when it goes into, and then of course, anything that goes into a self-pay category, that's discounted. So that's all in the adjustment. So, I know you're gonna have number questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and get Kevin up here so he can answer those for you. But if you have any questions, here.
Yeah, one thing I'm kind of moving, I have another meeting I have to go to shortly. Y'all can stay as long as you want. It's gonna take a little while for us to review this report. We're not gonna get to the bottom of this today, but hey, it's okay. Here's where we're at. Folks that are watching YouTube right now, they're going to know what we're gonna do. Okay. Ambulance business, EMS business has changed from what it was when y'all first went into business. That's pretty much it. You won't start running those anymore. We're not running to the hospital. We did back in the day, hospitals, whatever. So, in talking to other counties and other entities, cities, and such, I've discussed this before too. Chambers County, for instance, they have Chambers County EMS, which is operated by the county. They have Winnie ambulance service, Winnie Stoll ambulance service. They have Mont Bellevue ambulance service, which I'll tell you the truth, Mont Bellevue has a lot of money. They can throw in there what they want to. In discussing with them, their budget's around $3 million a year just for that one city. Okay? Y'all put that into consideration. I don't know what the Chambers County budget is. I haven't looked it up yet, but I'm sure it's online because it's going to be public information. So you can go back and look at that as well. We still haven't looked at that either, but that's going to be public information also. These are things to consider because right now people are wanting to know how we're going to get coverage. We're not getting it. What are we going to do? And they're looking not just at you, they're looking at Commissioner Arthur, me, Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Reese, anybody else, Chief Deputy Nealon, and they're ready to cut somebody's throat about not getting people to the hospital on time in that magic golden hour, so to speak. And we have to come up with answers to figure out a way to get that service up. I'm 65 years old. I'm still trying to figure out how the hell we got an ambulance business to begin with. The county did, but somehow we did. And we're in it, and we're in it for the long haul. I don't have a problem with that. Our job is to help the public, period. And that's what we're going to do. But still, we have to go through this report and look at it and see what it's going to take to get y'all rolling as best as we can and get the coverage we need. Because 3 ambulances is not enough for this county in what we call the county. Okay?
Right.
You've got Dayton, they've got their own ambulance service. I have yet to figure out how in the hell they signed a contract for $45,000 for a year with Allegiance. It doesn't make sense to me. When I know good and well, the contract for Mont Bellevue alone, or not contract, but their actual expense is $3 million.
Yeah, their
Per
budget's
year.
$3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Their budget's $3 million.
That's what their budget is, $3 million a year.
Well, they're dealing with, they can run this ambulance company out of business and they can charge us that much.
Well, that's my fear, but now you have to consider this too. Allegiance, their contract will expire with Dayton and Cleveland, to my understanding, December 31st. So I'm pretty sure they're getting ready to go into negotiations. And time is of the essence for us and for you and for anybody else in that matter. What are we gonna do? How can we get rolling strong enough to where not only people are satisfied, response time is quick. Mike, I don't know how to tell you that. I mean, we're jumped in here with all the people helping all we can. We just need to figure out what direction we need to go and be fair about it, not just to you and the commissioner's court, but for the taxpayers of Liberty County. Because they're the ones going to be footing the bill.
Yes.
If we have to come out in next year in a budget for the county and having a $10 million expenditure toward EMS services, I better have a darn good explanation why. Because I'm just liable to get fired the next year. That's how it works. This business, there's nothing that's for certain. So it's going to take us a little while to dig through this book. I mean, I can't do it today, but there's going to be a lot of questions that we're going to probably have to ask, and we want to help. Because y'all been very good to this county, been very good to all the communities, and we're still on the same team. We continue to do so.
Well, Jay, you wanting to cut to the chase. I assume that's what you wanting to do. I mean, we still have some things that we
Well,
have to do.
Mike, we can. The other side of it is, I would prefer that we get the opportunity. Let the commissioners look over these books and anyone else that is in consideration, and give them the opportunity to ask questions. I mean, we can have another workshop. But if y'all would like to give a synopsis in brief, it's great that you can go through.
I would say if you have any other billing related questions, anyone, while Kevin's here, because he's from San Antonio, since he is here right this second,
Well,
if
if
y'all
it's
have
okay,
anything real quick that you want to throw
I
at
can
him.
just do a quick overview of my section, and I think, and again, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of questions out there, so I'm happy to answer any. I think that, my part in this today was just really to kind of show where we were and where we are and how we got there. And basically section 8, 9, and 10 is what we call our month-end packets. What they did is they included the ones that covered where you can kind of go into the past. Now, as I stated before, there was another billing company involved from, I believe it was June 2018 to September 2019. We were doing the billing prior to that, and we're doing it currently now. So what basically the month-end packet shows is a graph on volume month to month at the time of closing. It also shows the cash receipts month to month. Again, I'm just kind of skimming through, so feel free to ask if you have any questions. This is a summary page of that current month starting and ending, and kind of going through step by step how we got there. And then a referral report is basically showing the revenue picking up from facilities and dropping off.
That shows where we pick up our patients and where we drop off our patients.
And that's basically repeated in tab 8, 9, and 10. One of the things I kind of drew up is to paint a little bit of color to some of this. Kind of going again, our last full year of billing for Liberty County EMS was 2017. At the time, as we mentioned before, they were doing about $320,000 a month average. That was with call volume going into, sorry, tap here. they were doing about 594 calls an average per month. One of the biggest things we noticed right off the bat when they came back, a few months in, was the drop in volume, and a lot of that was just a result of some contracts that were lost. So comparing 2017 to today, again, 594 trips per month. Today, we're doing about 340 per month. So again, that's about a 43% drop. So right away, that's a huge hit as far as their, just based off of volume. You kind of zoom in a little bit further. We talked about the Affordable Care Act and the impact of the Affordable Care Act on the industry. What happened there over time is, Levana said really well, copays and deductibles went through the roof. Average probably deductible back in 2017 was somewhere in the $1,200 ballpark. Average deductible today is about $2,500. Some of these plans have $10,000 deductibles, which translation to medical industry is patients paying for that bill. I mean, by the time they process that, insurance company's not paying a dime out of pocket. Ends up going to their, the patient's responsibility, and that's, pennies on the dollar if you're able to get that. So that's a huge part of it. Again, people, they're paying premiums and they have insurance on paper, but in reality, it's not really, doing much for the industry. In fact, in my opinion, it hurt it a little bit. In addition to that, these payers, what they call marketplace plans, they pay more, Medicaid style fee schedule. What that means is they're only paying base and miles. So all this medication that they were talking about earlier, none of that gets paid. They consider that lumped into the base fee, and then they pay that at a reduced rate. Average probably pay for Liberty County from a marketplace plan is probably about $600 on a transport, 30, 45 miles, to Houston or whatnot. So again, all those supplies we talked about, all those different services that we bill for those plans, marketplace, Medicare and Medicaid, they're only paying you base and miles. Everything else, it's not covered. And when you kind of compare 2017 to 2020, what they call payer mix, so we're kind of looking at the overall, payers that are in the area. In 2017, Liberty County EMS's top 10 payers, 8 of them are commercial and 2 of them are Medicare and Medicaid plans. In 2020, 6 of the 10 are now Medicare, Medicaid, or marketplace plans. So 60% of their top 10 payers are only paying base and miles at a reduced federal or state rate. And again, this is because of the marketplace plans, increases in deductibles and co-payments. And again, we talked about Medicare cutting dialysis too. That's another area where they've trimmed over the years. And then the last thing, that just kind of looking at Liberty County's, 2017 area versus today. We were talking about level of service earlier. What I did is I grabbed everything for the year of 2017 and kind of looked at how many of those calls were ALS, advanced life support emergencies, non-emergencies. The takeaway I saw was in 2017, 59% of the trips that we billed were ALS emergency transports. In 2020, up until the end of September, that's dropped 8% to 51% of the trips we're billing are ALS emergencies. Where the increase happened was BLS emergencies, so basic life support transports, lower level of service, lower reimbursement. That went up in 2017. That was 16% of the transports in 2017 were basic life support, and that increased to 21% in 2020. So again, when you talk about level of service and reimbursement, that's a big part of it. If you're billing an ALS service, your reimbursement is going to be higher from the different payers versus a BLS, and then same thing with emergency and non-emergency. And one of the biggest takeaways to me from this as well was 2017, 13% of what we billed were treatment no transports. They went to the scene, treated a patient, they didn't go to the hospital. That went up 9% in 2020. So we're sitting at 693 treatment no transports going to the end of September so far. So I do anticipate that's going to surpass 2017, and we're going to see about a 9-10% increase in that. Out of all that, you throw in the COVID pandemic. My company, Quick Med Claims, we service 38 states. We have about 830 clients across the country. And we've seen a 20 to 30% drop in volume and cash over this across the board. So this is a company-wide, or industry-wide issue. So, again, the same thing happened here. It impacted them as well. What the ripple effect of that too is more people are opting to stay home, not go to the hospital. What we noticed a lot was, people weren't out and about because people are home and they're quarantined. So no, motor vehicle accidents are down. Again, there's a lot of these, what are they, freestanding facilities now. People aren't going to the hospitals, they're going to freestanding. So that's played a big part of it as well. We don't really know what tomorrow brings. We don't know when this is going to stop. Will it ever stop? What is the new norm? So we just have to proceed with caution, but I mean, it definitely has ripples in the industry across the whole country and probably across the world as well. And then just the last thing I'll end with is, when it comes down to the pandemic, we don't really know what tomorrow brings. So it's really hard to say where this is going to go from here. But we do know that it has been a big factor here recently. But overall, I think the 2017 to 2020, taking COVID out of it, volume drop is a huge part, and then level of services changed significantly as well. So, and then again, the payer mix, which is almost directly related to the Affordable Care Act.
Any questions?
No, just one thing, the average person that might be listening today,
Right.
they don't care about numbers. I can tell you all that. They want to know how many ambulances do you have available?
Right.
Where are they located? If you have one that has a transport, say from DayZeta to the medical center in Houston, what ambulance is going to replace that one that was there in case you have another emergency? What if you have a major vehicle accident and you have 3 ambulances on the scene there? What about the other places? It's in one location.
Which has happened.
Yeah, that's what people want to know. And the numbers are going to tell us what we have to do to get there. Sure, we have more boxes, as y'all call them. That's a new word for me, but I've learned a little bit about it talking to Mike and company. But what we need to do is really study the book a little bit and come up with some good answers and good questions about what is it going to take for us to up our level of play. Is it going to take more involvement with the county, the cities to get involved with the county's efforts, the mutual aid aspect? That's another thing. Where's the line drawn where mutual aid stops or begins? That people want to know about. In other words, why is Liberty County EMS across the border of Liberty County, and not in Liberty County? And that happens to you because you're going to get called out. Somebody, if another ambulance can't get there, they're going to call the next available one, which would be you, maybe. Those are things that people want to know why. They don't care about the numbers. I'm going to tell you right now, when grandma is choking to death, they don't care about the numbers.
Right.
They want grandma taken to the hospital right now. So I'm just going from a layman's viewpoint, not as an EMS personnel's viewpoint. Okay? Those are the kind of questions that people ask me.
Well, and we are fully aware of that, we fight those, probably no more than what the sheriff's department fights, response time.
Exactly.
And there are times in our business, as like their business, where we may have, 1 or 2 calls going on at one time, and then we've got 3 or 4 or 5 calls going on at the same time, as well as maybe a motor vehicle accident that's going to take 2 or 3 ambulances. We just get swamped. And so we start calling neighboring entities, and that's the same thing they do with us.
But I get down to this too. I mean, you might have one day you don't get called at all.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it too. But you still have to be on call.
That is correct.
Now, this is something people want to know. I've been told this before. It is one box. To outfit one box of personnel, the ambulance itself, and all the medical equipment inside there, and medicines, everything else is in, and for a full year, it's about $500,000. Is that correct, or is it more?
It's more.
More.
It's $1 million.
It's $1 million, okay. That's what people will, they like to know this.
Right.
So one ambulance, fully staffed, for 365 days, 24 hours a day, with everything in there that you need to treat somebody, get them to the hospital, it's $1 million. So one ambulance in Bayzetta, one ambulance in Tarkington, where's the other one gonna be located, just a Rover?
It's on 321,
321.
is what it's at now. 321 fire department.
Okay, that's $3 million worth of ambulance out there.
Right.
Okay.
Our budget, if you caught it if you looked in there, is 2.9. Where we're at is 2.97
Right.
or something like that.
Right. And, you know, Mont Bellevue, just looking at theirs, I think they're running 4 ambulances and they have a 5th in reserve. That's just for Mont Bellevue itself. And it's kind of hard to compare. I mean, I'm not tossing apples at you and saying, let's do something else, but folks need to understand that, you know. That Mont Bellevue's a different critter down there. They got a lot of income from oil revenue, which we hope it stays that way after the election.
Right.
Don't want to go there either. But, you know, in looking at those scenarios, try to come up with an answer if we can get better. That's what we want to do.
Right.
And keep things going with y'all too.
Well, our situation is becoming kind of in dire straits.
Right.
And so whatever we determine, we do have a lot of numbers back here in the back that will answer the questions of what's needed and how much is needed. We do have Leanne Brent's here, and she was going to go over some of that, but you know, we're going to have some pretty good cash.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'd like to do, Mike, is give us an opportunity to go through these books. You know?
Okay.
I mean, it's a whole lot to absorb in one hour, an hour and a half meeting. But give us a chance to go through there and get some questions and, you know, what we think our answer might be, and then what your answer is going to be, and compare those together.
Right.
And see what we can do in either budget building or something.
Right.
You know, and let's get fair about this. Not fair to the Commissioner's Court, fair to the people of Liberty County.
Right.
That's what it amounts to.
Right.
And it,
We can't be unique. I mean, it's gotta be affecting other counties the same way.
I think it is.
I'm
affecting
thinking
other counties.
Representative Bell,
Every county in the
Senator
state.
Nichols, are they, the legislature meets in 2 months. Are they going to be addressing this?
Well, you can't compare us to Montgomery County.
Yeah.
Because they have a hospital district that pays for their EMS service. We don't have that.
Yeah, their budget's about 65, 70 million.
But there's whole swaths of West Texas that have to be facing similar
Sure.
situations. I'm just wondering statewide if they're going to address some of
I'm not gonna
those.
drag them there in a wagon.
In our area, we are unique.
Yeah.
We have a big county.
Yeah.
We're not supported by these big industries and municipals. So you check around, Beaumont, Houston, Providence, they all have good budgets.
But what about East Texas?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
talking about our.
I'm wondering if there's anything legislatively they're gonna do to address some of them. Sounds like it should.
We've been waiting 6 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the standard in West Hardy County is about an hour for me, but those people.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Mike. Hey, let's get it figured out.
We service.
So we're gonna have to,
Montana.
I'll give you a call tomorrow or this afternoon.
Yeah,
They just can't get it.
tomorrow will be better.
Okay.
I got.
Okay, well, do we need to go ahead and
No,
shut
y'all
this down?
can go ahead and discuss some more, please.
Okay.
I just got one I have to go to.
Oh, okay. Why don't we go ahead and skip forward to Leanne, what Leanne's going to go through and talk about. Financial aspect of things. Do I? Yes, sir.
I've got a meeting over at the Dayton City Hall I've got to go attend.
Okay, well, I'm gonna bring you up a book this afternoon when I leave here. Are you gonna be there? Or you wait till tomorrow?
Probably wait till tomorrow, mate.
Okay,
Okay.
all right,
All right, I apologize.
all right. Boo, you want me to bring you one, Boo?
Yes, sir, if you would.
Yes, sir, I'll bring you one tomorrow too. Okay? Okay. Yeah. So Leanne's gonna talk about our financial aspect of things.
Okay, I'm Leanne Brents, with Swain Brents and Associates here in Liberty. I actually, when I joined the firm with Byron Swain, one of my first assignments was to do a review of what has now become Liberty County EMS, and that was 23 years ago as well.
Yeah.
So I've got a long history with them. We now do a monthly compilation for the EMS. And what that means is there's actually 3 levels of service of assurance that a CPA can do. One of them is audit. The next one is a review, which is a step down from an audit. You still have a lot of notes to the financial statements. It looks just like an audit report, but instead of nailing everything, you're actually just asking a lot of questions. And then the lower level is a compilation. And a compilation is where you take the financial information, you do the same adjustments that you would do to make sure that it is fairly presented. And then you do ask questions, but you don't have to have all of the notes to the financial statements included in there. So you can get pretty good assurance every month without doing that. And that's the level that we do. The financial information is already in QuickBooks is what y'all are using to do your financial statements. And Lavana does the majority of that. And then we're taking that and reconciling all the bank accounts or reviewing the bank reconciliations, tying out all the debt, asking a lot of questions that I'm sure she wished we wouldn't ask every month, but tying everything out to where we know that the financials that are presented are fairly presented. One of the things that has come up today has to do with these receivables and how do you record that and know what you've got and how much you're going to get and be able to record that. And so years ago, in trying to figure out a way to where Mike would know what he had, you don't want to spend what you don't have, is if you look at the financials, and it's on several tabs in here, some of the financials that we do. I think tab 12 and 13 have some of the monthlies. On the balance sheet, you'll see the receivables there, but then there's a pretty big allowance for doubtful accounts that historically has been about 60%. We don't want to count it till you get it. The part that they thought they were going to get was only about 40%, but until you actually receive it, which there's a time lag from when you do it and when it gets billed and then it gets out there and finally gets collected, you don't want to count it till the money's in your bank. And so that other 40% that you think you're going to get is sitting in the liability section as a deferred revenue, because until you get it, you don't want to count it. So when you look at the income statements that are also in those sections and you're looking at revenue, that's what actually got collected. You don't want to blend it with things you didn't get. That's what actually came through there. The last tab on tab 15, there's a page in there called cash flow analysis. And this is probably the most succinct way to take a look at what we're talking about that's happened with the numbers. The cash flow analysis schedule has a 2018, 2019, and an 8-month 2020 presentation in summary form. And the total revenue of most of which was billings that were collected was a little over $4 million back in 2018. And of that $4 million, 3.7 of it was the billings that were coming in. And as the years have gone, in 2019, the revenues went down to 3.2, and of that 2.7 was the billings. And then when you get to 2020, for 8 months, we're at $1.7 million, and $1.2 million is the billings collected. And if you look at an 8-month calculation and compare if we were going at the same level as we were in 2018, we would have collected 2.4 million in billings for 8 months. If we were going at the same level we were in 19, we would have collected $1.8 million for 8 months. But we're not. We're at $1.2 million. So things have gone down significantly. The Liberty County EMS does not have a steady stream of revenue like taxes that it can count on that's going to be collected to then help it spread its months. It doesn't. And so as a result of that, you'll see that expenses also went down. And they started out at 4.3 in 18, went down to 3.5 in 19, and went down to $2 million for the 8 months 2020. The one thing to remember when you're looking at the financial statements of Liberty County EMS is it's different from a governmental entity. Its expenses are not expenditures. That's not the money that all went out. There are things that aren't on the income statement that are normally in expenditures for a governmental entity. And those are capital expenditures and those are principal payments on debt. That normally is in a governmental entity budget, but for a nonprofit and the financial statements, those are on their balance sheet, taken away from liabilities or adding to their assets. And so because of that, we have included those here on this cash flow analysis so you can see those levels. And you can see the debt principal payments for the 3 years. And then you can see the capital expenditures were non-existent, as has been discussed here today. They really haven't had any capital expenditures in the last 3 years. At the end of the day, they were in the hole. For 18, about $350,000. For 19, about $350,000. And although they got $90,000 in grants in 2020, they were in the hole already for 8 months, $358,000 without those grants. So how did they survive in 2020? I've indicated it down there for you. They got a PPP loan of $280,000 and they got an SBA loan of $150,000, and that's how they've been able to survive. So they've reduced their costs. There are certain costs that are fixed costs, and just like you just said, if there are certain ambulances that are ready to go with all the supplies and all the things, that's going to cost just as a fixed cost. And then you have variable costs that will add to that as you provide services and do and replace and things. But the fixed costs are still going to be there if you're going to provide those services. In the same section, in section 15, there is a sheet called Collections from Patient Billing. And this is a monthly analysis so you can see it. That in 2018, the billings were at the $300,000 level, as you mentioned. It had gone down in 19 to about a 220 average per month level. And in 2020, if you look at the average for the year for 8 months, it's 155,000, but that is skewed because January had 200,000. And as you look month to month, it's steadily declined down to 120, and now it's closer to $100,000 level. You can easily see it. On the next page also, there's an expenses page that also is by month for the amounts that were on the income statement, again, not including capital expenditures or the debt. But you can also see how those expenses, they tried to pull those down as much as they could as they were going on to pull it on down. So I think the story here today is for sure that billings has been what supplemented you. So that you could do all the things you needed to do. And that wasn't a steady base of income because now that the rug has been pulled out. And so you don't have a steady to help prop it up to be able to provide those services. We've done some analysis on where you are and what it's going to take. I know one of the concerns, and I'll jump into this and then I'll turn it back over to you, Mike, for that part. But I know one of the concerns that Mike had was he did these numbers, he knew the calculations, and he knew the number was about $33,000. And so I've gone back and forth with this for a while. And he was right, it was $33,000, but that was an analysis through May. And you can see what's happened since May. it hasn't stayed at that same steady level. So that's why the numbers now, it's gonna be bigger than that. So,
Yeah, that's when we came and got the 400, after the 400,000. The numbers have changed, they've gotten worse. And, so what's required now is gonna be considerably more than that. And, we can talk about that now, or we can do it, after y'all go through all these numbers, take a look at all these numbers, but. I mean, we're gonna be looking at a lot of money, quite a lot of money. Continue on, operating with, ambulances, and the more ambulances you need, right now, we're at $2.9 million of our operations costs annually. And, we're running 3 ambulances. But across the board in the marketplace of ambulances, if you asked any ambulance service, what's the cost of running one ambulance, 24 hours a day, with the labor cost and the operation cost of the ambulance and insurance, so on and so forth, that's what you're looking at, is about $1 million. So that's where we're at now, and we've got a loss that we've been absorbing, that, we're getting to the point where we're just not going to absorb that. And, so, see y'all.
So more or less, the shortfall amount, 847. What you would do
Let me get where you're at.
in additional. Sorry, it's the very last page. Currently providing 934, shortfall 847.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be for us to meet our budget, to break even
And to keep
in our budget.
more or less the same number of,
Right.
same level of service that we
Right.
currently have.
That extra money would put us there. Now, we've got ambulances that we need to replace. Now, we have 2 ambulances on notes at $6,040 or something of that nature. And those 2 ambulances are in this particular month. But we're in dire need of replacing our ambulances, need to get them, the boxes remounted, in addition to the van ambulances, we can get those pretty quickly. And we've got box ambulances that are failing on us, constantly. And we need to replace those, so we're gonna have to have some additional money for that at some point in time. But now, I mean, just for us to, it's $1,782,000 overall for us to, we're $248,504 a month is what our cost is. And, so now we're figuring that we're going to get at least $100,000 a month is what we're counting on. I don't know that that's good or it's not good. According to Kevin, we think that that's going to be good, right? And that'll give us, of that $2,982,048, 1.2 million brings it down to 1,782,000, and that's where we need to be. That's where we need to be. I mean, we have trimmed and trimmed and trimmed on our budget, and the next trim is going to be employee, payroll cuts and insurance cuts that we're paying for the employees and benefits. And if we do that, we're not going to have anybody working for us. I can tell you that right now. So we're at a point where we've got to work this out, and we've got to work it out soon.
I have a question for you, Bill. I know fire departments are normally nonprofit, and when they render services, insurance crashes, things like that, they don't get a lot of reimbursement. When an ESD takes over the contracting and actually starts billing the insurance or the automobile insurance, because they are a government, they tend to recoup a whole lot more. Can you speak to that, or would that, say a government took over Liberty County EMS, because it would fall under a government umbrella, would insurance companies pay more?
I mean, they don't really look at it based off of who's billing it or what the entity is at all. It's just strictly based off of, you know, they look at rural, where you're picking them up from. They base reimbursements off of that. I think with a government, usually when there's more of a government involvement, you just have more resources that allows that. You know, you have quicker access to police reports for MVAs, so it's easier to get a hold of, you know, insurances tied to that. But I haven't seen anything that suggests that because they're a government entity, they get more reimbursement from the insurance.
In ESD 7, we've had a 100% increase in billable revenues. I don't know. The insurance company said that they didn't want to have to go to a lawsuit with a government entity. I don't know. It's just something that I've seen some ESDs in the county experience. It's been a positive thing. I don't know. But okay, thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak on behalf of that. I do know that insurance companies ask if you're a government entity. So, you know, in our case, we don't have that experience to know the difference. But you know, yeah, I mean, I would imagine there's something there, but I wouldn't be able to answer that, unfortunately.
Well, I think that, you know, it would behoove this organization to take a serious look at becoming a government, like a county. You know, I think it would definitely be a wise decision for both of us. I mean, when the county is putting out the kind of dollars that the county's gonna have to put out for EMS service, you know, they probably would like to have better control. Anybody got any questions?
No, I think we'll give us a little chance to look over some of this stuff
Okay.
and I agree with you. I probably gonna have to look at this pretty hard.
Right. Yeah, it's just, we've just been hit too hard. You know, I mean, that's been a hard thing. You know, we fought real hard. It just, if it wouldn't have been for the stimulus money, it already happened, you know, we'd already been adjusted harder.
Well, if something get put off any longer, we have to address it.
Yeah. We gotta deal with it, one way or the other. And it was the U.S. Labor Board is what I was trying to think of. We had the U.S. Labor Board was on our case. So. Well, thank y'all for coming out.
I'm sorry we got started late.
We did, it just, I tried to put too much on one.